Hi, I'm Neil Hermes and welcome to my weekly bird wrap, where this week I have 3 stories for you: cassowaries, COVID and cockatoos. Hi, I'm Neil Hermes and welcome to my weekly bird wrap, where the first story I want to talk about today is cockatoos, and in particular sulphur-crested cockatoos. Now, parrots and large parrots occur all over Australia and all over South America. In Australia we have large species of cockatoos, and in southern Australia one of the common species is the sulphur-crested cockatoo, a very large white cockatoo with a big sulphur-crested or yellow-crested crest that comes out when the birds land. I had an interesting observation by a visitor from America the other day, and she asked me about what are those mohawk birds, and certainly they look like a mohawk when the crest goes up. But the story about the white cockatoos is that they can be very destructive. In the last couple of years, the ACT government, for example, has had to replace 250 light fittings on street lights because of the antics of white cockatoos. And it's not just the rubber that they tear out of light fittings and make the lights non-functional. It's the damage that they do to trees when they're looking for insects, and then lawns when they dig them up when they're looking for grubs in the or grass tips in the lawn. But then they go on to timber. They go on to redwood timber. They go on to barbecue timber. They go into railings. I've seen situations where white cockatoos have picked out the putty from windows and the windows have fallen in. These birds can be very destructive. They have a massive bill and they often can find food relatively easily, and so they have plenty of time on their hands to then find things to do with this huge bill. I would, whilst I often say to people it's fine to feed birds, and as long as you're feeding them the right sort of food, having a few white cockatoos coming into your garden to feed is fine, but just be wary. If you have too many of them coming in and they have too much time on their hands, they may decide instead of just eating the food that's been put out for them, they might start eating your shrubs or even eating your furniture. So be wary of the white cockatoos in your garden. My second story today is a story out of the US, which is about COVID. Now, a group of many thousands of citizen science have put some data together, which has been interpreted by a university in California, about the impacts of COVID on birds in our cities. Now, it's not a very surprising result that they've got, but I suppose it's interesting that it's happened. What occurred when we were all in lockdown is that we weren't out in the parks, and we weren't out in the lakes and the fields around our cities, nor were we necessarily in some of the the car parks and the streets and things which generally aren't suitable much for birds. We weren't in any of those areas. And birds that might well have found parks nice and now were then, because they were vacant areas, were then coming into areas where you wouldn't normally have seen birds. So into car parks and street areas where not a lot of things were going on for birds, but because there was no people around, the birds came in much more into less desirable parts of the city and became spread through the cities more. I don't suppose that's very surprising, but what's happened is since COVID has eased back and we've been going out into our cities more, that impact has changed, and the birds are now not being found in these hard areas, these concrete areas nearly so much, and are now being found back in the parks and the lakes around our cities. Not surprising, but an interesting study done by a group of citizen science in the Pacific Northwest in the United States. My last story today is about cassowaries. Now, cassowaries are a large flightless bird that occur in Australia and in New Guinea. There's one species found in Australia and a couple of smaller species found in New Guinea. Magnificent, big, robust birds that nest on the ground. They're flightless, very large birds, and they occur in rainforests. Sadly, they're becoming less and less frequent in the rainforest areas, and there's more interest now in making sure we can breed them in captivity to make sure we have an insurance policy in captivity against birds disappearing in parts of their range. Now, the good story is that there's a zoo in the Gold Coast, had a male cassowary that was looking for a mate. His name was Troppo, and a zoo in Townsville had a cassowary female whose name was Hope, and these two birds have been brought together. Troppo was packaged up into a truck in the Gold Coast, did the big journey, 1,500 k's up to Townsville, and is now with Hope. And there is now hope that they might actually find one another attractive. So Hope is a famous bird in Townsville. Hope is Private Hope and is part of the Australian Army. She's a mascot for one of the battalions in Townsville. So Private Hope now has a boyfriend, Troppo, who's now settled in with her, and there's lots of hope now, not only with the general people all around Townsville, but by the battalion that's supporting Hope, that we may get eggs. And of course in Cassowaries it's the male that looks after the young, and that Hope will produce lots of eggs and we'll get lots of young from that matching up. So there's hope for cassowaries in North Queensland. I hope you've enjoyed the stories today. If you have, check out the other YouTube clips and see the other stories that I've done. Also check out the website for other stories. And if you're interested in doing safaris with me, checking out birds either in the Canberra region, in southern Australia, in Norfolk Island, or even further abroad in places like New Guinea and Vanuatu, please check out the availability of safaris and join us on a trip when you can. With that, that's all I have for you today, so happy birding.